This week on Fantasy Football Reporters, we have the Week 1 review, we have Week 2 Beast and Busts, we have our absolute bonehead play of the week, and finally we have our Fantasy Football Stat Challenge. Pass it over to Sean to talk about Week 1.
All right, let's go over it. We had a lot of stuff to talk about in Week 1. First, I'm going to start with the New Orleans-Minnesota game. People expected a lot of fantasy points out of this game, and that just really wasn't the case. Adrian Peterson, the number 2 pick in many drafts, had a bad fantasy football day with only 87 yards, and he didn't find the end zone. Breeze had a so-so day. He had no interceptions, but he only threw for 237 yards and 1 touchdown. And Favre was mediocre at best with a touchdown and an interception and 171 yards. The bright spots. Favre's lone touchdown went to Visanthe Shiancoe, one of my Week 1 sleepers. 76 yards he had, and a team leading 4 receptions. So when your tight end's leading your team in receptions with only 4, it's a pretty bad day. And Pierre Thomas in the game had 19 carries to Reggie Bush's 2. So I guess we know who the lead running back is going to be in New Orleans. He had 71 yards, and he did find the end zone. Moving on to the Colts and the Texans. Hi, I'm Peyton Manning from the obvious department. I throw for 433 yards and 3 touchdowns. No interceptions. Austin Carley, Reggie Wayne, and Dallas Clark all racked up a boatload of yards, and they had a touchdown each. So expected a lot more similar days from Peyton Manning and their 3 receivers there. My colleague Frank still has a boner from Arian Foster's 231-yard 3 TD day, especially since he drafted him in, I think, the 6th round, 7th round?
Something like that.
Not a bad number 2 fantasy back. I don't expect him to have quite a huge day as that against Washington this week, because Washington did hold the Dallas running backs in check, at least. Schaub, a mediocre day, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 107 yards. And Andre Johnson, who's going in the first round in many drafts, had only 3 receptions and 33 yards. Head over to the Pats and Bengals. If you had Carson Palmer in the first half, you were sweating until the second half. He only had 129 yards and an interception in the first half, and in the second half he got his 2 touchdowns and 216 more yards. So he had a pretty good day. As well as Chad, 85, 159 yards and 1 touchdown. Brady was his usual self, 258 yards is on the low side. He did have 3 touchdowns. Moss had a bad fantasy day with only 59 yards, and Welker had 64 yards, but he did have the 2 picks. They have a tough matchup coming up this week against the Jets. I know we're both wearing Tom Brady jerseys, but we're not stupid. Actually, one of Frank's busts of the week is Tom Brady, so you might want to think about sitting him if you have other options. Last game we'll talk about is the Seattle-San Francisco game. The only San Francisco players I would start at this point till further notice would be Vernon Davis and Frank Gore. Gore only had 38 yards of rushing, but he did manage to grab 6 receptions and 45 yards out of those. So Vernon Davis had a team-leading 8 receptions and 73 yards. And Seattle actually looked like a sound football team on Sunday. I don't see any of their running backs having value. Forsett had 7 carries, Jones had 8, Washington had 6 carries. So it looks like they'll be spreading it around a lot on the ground this year. Hasselbeck looked good with 3 total TDs and only 1 interception. And it was against the San Francisco defense that was supposed to be pretty good this year, but that remains to be seen. So now I want you to check out our site, fantasyfootballreporters.com, every Tuesday for our Monday night breakdown. And right now I'm going to pass it over to Frank for the weekly Beasts and Busts of the Week.
So our Week 2 predictions. First off, Aaron Rodgers, with Ryan Grant actually being out, he's going to get a lot more put on his shoulders. He's going to be the only person really. I mean, Brandon Jackson's an okay backup. It's should pick him up if he's available. In most leagues, he was until this week. But if he's still out there for some reason, pick him up. He's going to be good. But Aaron Rodgers is going to be throwing the ball a lot more, especially this week. I mean, Buffalo, they're just terrible. Let's be honest. Start Aaron Rodgers all day. Next up, Mike Vick. We're reporting that Vick is going to start. Kevin Kolb is out with a concussion. Start Mike Vick. He's playing Detroit. I mean, again, not a very good team. They're still young. They have a lot of offensive issues now with Stafford being out as well. So definitely start Vick. Next up, Jamal Charles against the Browns. He looked good last week. He didn't get as many carries as we would have liked, or if you own him in your league, as you would have liked. But he did, break a big run, and he looked awesome. So definitely start him as well. Another guy that we like, last week he had a pretty good week, Darren McFadden. Michael Bush is still questionable with a thumb injury, and he's playing the St. Louis Rams this week. So look for McFadden to have another big week to follow up his first week. Antonio Gates, obviously, he's one of the top 3 tight ends every single year, it seems like. Start him. He's one of the few options Phillip Rivers has. And Vernon Davis against the Saints defense. I think the Saints defense is good, but San Fran's wideouts, aren't as good. Davis is really one of the few options, Davis and Gore, and I think the Saints defense will cover the wideouts fine, but I think Davis is going to be the only person really left for Alex Smith to throw to. Defense, I would say Green Bay and Philly, for the same reasons as we already talked about. They're not playing that good teams. There's a lot of injuries involved on the other side of the ball. As for our bust, Sean talked about Carson Palmer earlier. He had a great day against the Pats, especially in the second half when they were throwing the ball a lot. And they do have some offensive weapons now with T.O. and Chadwick as well. But he's playing the Ravens defense this week, and the Ravens defense looked pretty good. Ask Mark Sanchez about that, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But they look pretty good, so definitely sit him. We both have Tom Brady jerseys on. I think Tom Brady he's a must start just because he's Tom Brady, but he's going to have a very tough matchup this week. He only threw 1 touchdown pass against the Jets last year. He did have decent amount of yards, but he had some picks and only 1 touchdown pass. So if you have somebody, as a good backup, like a Mike Vick or something to that effect, start him. But I would say you have to start Brady, but in our minds he's about 50-50 this week. It could go either way. Next up, the biggest bust of all this week and probably for the year is going to be Sean Green. He looked terrible, fumbled twice in the 6 or 7 touches that he actually had, and it seems that LT has taken over the starting role there. So sit him for the near future until something happens to LT or LT starts to slow down or whatever it is, because LT actually looks pretty good right now. So Sean Green, definitely sit him. Another running back, Cedric Benson. He did get a garbage touchdown last week against the Patriots, but the backup was in a lot because they were passing it, and Cedric, he's not a great catching back. And they're playing the Baltimore Ravens defense. So again, look at sitting Cedric Benson, go elsewhere with that. Possible wideouts to sit, Calvin Johnson with Stafford being out, playing a decent defense this week. And Chad Ochocinco, again, just because he's playing the Ravens defense. Look for other people, even Gresham on Cincinnati to do something this week. For tight ends, Owen Daniels, until he's 100%, he at this point is still not 100%, and he didn't look like he was involved much in the offense. So if you have other options, great. If you don't, Daniels is a great tight end when he's healthy, but right now he's still not 100%. And John Carlson, if you have that bad of a tight end as your number 1, he is a good tight end, don't get me wrong, but he's just not involved in the offense right now. They have a bunch of wideouts. Who knows where they're coming from? They're pulling him out of the bleachers, it seems like. But start somebody else instead of him until he gets involved more. And then for defense, San Fran, they gave up a ton of points to, again, the Seattle team that as Sean touched on, who even knew? Mike Williams from 10 years ago just came out of the woodwork, it seems like, had a decent game. So, I think definitely sit them. And then above that, I don't know why San Fran was even overrated as much as they are. They were above the Jets, the Ravens, and even the Packers defenses by most experts. So, again, they're very overrated. Sit them and go with somebody else. I'm going to pass it back to Sean. He's going to talk a little bit about the injuries from week 1.
Yeah, I love Mike Vick this week, though. Yeah, that's a great pick. Actually, I started Mike Vick over Carson Palmer in one of my leagues. I picked up Vick in free agency. He was available.
Great move.
Just because of the Baltimore defense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So while we're talking about Mike Vick, the injuries, he is going to start. Well, they're saying that Kevin Kolb failed his concussion test a few days ago. They're going to give him another concussion test, but it looks like all signs are pointing that Mike Vick is going to start this week against the Lions. Bob Sanders is out most likely all year. He had a torn biceps muscle, and he actually had surgery on it earlier this week. So, that's bad for the Indianapolis defense that gave up to 231 yards rushing last Sunday. So next, Kevin Boss is out with a concussion. He's on the edge of probably the starting tight ends, but some people have him as their starter, and you're going to want to sit him this week because he's definitely out at least one game. Ryan Grant, obviously, as we've been reporting all week, has been placed on IR. He's out for the year. That's a really big hit for Green Bay. We're expecting good things out of Grant this year, and they're definitely going to feel that in their offense. Chris Jenkins tore his ACL, the same ACL that he tore last year, and this is weird. he actually had it repaired from a muscle in his leg, from his hamstring. Instead of getting a different ACL from a cadaver, he had it taken from his hamstring in his leg, and which is severely weaker than a tendon, and obviously it just didn't hold up. So he's out for the year again with the same torn ACL that he had last year. Stafford has the grade 2 shoulder separation. Sean Hill's going to be starting in his place. And right now, toss it back over to Frank.
All right, so we have our first bonehead play of the week, and this is from week 1. It's 4th and 10, and it's the end of the game. They're down 1 point. Mark Sanchez, back to pass. Keller's running. Sanchez throws it. What's Keller thinking? Oh my God, Mark Sanchez actually threw a spiral. Who would have thought? Catches the ball. Now what is he thinking? He's very close to the sideline, but he realizes that there's nobody within 12 yards of him, and he just can't risk it, so he probably just wants to get out of bounds. Maybe that's what he was thinking. I don't know. Next, was he thinking, maybe the refs will give us 5 downs because Hard Knocks was such a great show.
It was a great show.
I don't know. Either way, maybe he just wanted to move on to get to the Pats next week because it is going to be a good game, and he just wanted the game to be over. But Dustin Keller, you take home the biggest bonehead play of the week for sure. He had plenty of room to run. He ran out of bounds. Not sure why he did it, but if anyone's interested in these 2 cards, the first 2 emails will have, first emailer that emails us through our site, again, fantasyfootballreporters.com, will get their choice of either one. Both probably not worth too much money, but they have both our rookie cards. This is a game-used jersey card, and this is Stafford and Sanchez college card. So whoever's the second emailer will have whatever cards the first email didn't want. So
That's it. Check out the site every day for updates, www.fantasyfootballreporters.com. See you next week.
You stay classy, Randy Moss.